Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Legal Aid of North Carolina's Free Forum Friday event. I am Elizabeth Savage, and I am a fellow with the Legal Aid Disaster Relief Project. Today, we're going to have an open forum discussion on how to best prepare this 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. I am also going to discuss how to best prepare while still recovering from previous disasters and how COVID-19 impacts both the preparation and recovery processes. This event is intended to be a conversation-based live event, so we will be monitoring the chat throughout. If you have a comment or question, please ask it in the chat box, and I am prepared to pause and address comments in real time today. First, I want to provide a brief overview of Legal Aid of North Carolina and the Disaster Relief Project. Legal Aid is a statewide nonprofit legal services organization that provides free legal services to eligible individuals. The Disaster Relief Project of Legal Aid in particular provides free legal services to help disaster survivors with their recovery process. Recently, we are focused on long-term recovery from Hurricane Florence for individuals and communities. There are a lot of things that we can generally do for low-income or elderly individuals who were impacted by Hurricane Florence. Consumer Matters is one thing that we do. We can help people if they're having insurance policy concerns or questions. A lot of people have also experienced contractor fraud and scam. And if you're still having things like landlord-tenant issues, property ownership questions, our project is prepared to assist with that as well. Oftentimes, clients are already involved in the recovery process with a recovery program or organization and are experiencing some legal issues that are preventing access or further access through that organization's process. So we can assist with not only connecting to those organizational resources, but helping you along in that process. And lastly, we can also draft simple wills and deeds for survivors of Hurricane Florence. And I'll just briefly highlight that we also work with community organizations. If anyone here is involved in a community organization and wants to know how we can support your work on disaster recovery or help you overcome an issue that your community is facing, please give us a call, reach out to us after this forum. And again, if you as an individual are experiencing any of these disaster-related issues, please reach out to us at 1-866-219-5262, or you can submit an application online at legalaidnc.org. All right, so we're going to jump into today's programming. We're going to be talking about the top 10 tips to prepare for hurricane season. The first thing is to learn your local community's risk and response plans. Every community is different, and even pockets within certain communities are going to look different. And the way you need to react to prepare for a hurricane, and ask also if a hurricane is coming your way, the way you're going to have to respond is going to be different depending on where you are located. Eastern North Carolina is commonly hit every year, every season. We always have some sort of tropical storm disaster or hurricane. And this season is actually anticipated to be a very active Atlantic hurricane season. So it's important to prepare and to expect that this is going to be coming. Also, even if you're not on the Eastern North Carolina coast, your particular area may be prone to flood risk or mudslides or other types of natural disasters that can occur. So definitely be aware of where you're located and at what point you need to be considering your risk for your community and how that's going to change the way you respond. And of course, this season we have the overarching burden of COVID-19. The way COVID-19 is impacting your preparedness plans, it should be considered. It should be a thing that you are thinking of. We have active community spread across North Carolina. And so ensuring your health and safety now and relating to COVID-19 will impact your ability to react during a disaster. It may actually impact your ability to seek shelter in local locations later on. And ultimately, it will impact your ability to recover faster after a disaster. So keep up with public health guidelines, keep up with the expected guidance for how to work through COVID-19, and do your best to stay safe and healthy for you and your family and household. Number 2, create a household emergency plan that includes communication, evacuation, and shelter strategies. Communication is key, and it's important that you communicate with your household members exactly what you're going to do in the event of an emergency and how you're going to communicate with each other. It may be via phone. It may be a central location for everyone to meet. It may be via email, but you need to know these things ahead of time and distribute that communication strategy. Again, evacuation is also something you need to consider. Not every region is going to be the same. This season, North Carolina is actually rolling out a NC Know Your Zone. So there are certain zones and pockets of North Carolina that have predetermined the evacuation plans if something were to occur. So please visit the Know Your Zone website. See if you fall into one of those regions that has already predetermined the evacuation zones and how you're expected to do so properly and safely. And if you're not in a Know Your Zone region, please consider how you and your family would evacuate, where you would go. And that leads into this third point, which is shelter. You, on top of knowing how to evacuate quickly and efficiently, you should know where you're going to go. It can be not only stressful in the moment of a disaster to try to collect your thoughts, collect your things, collect not just important possessions, but knowing exactly where you're expected to go, and how you're expected to get there. Are you using a car, are you using a train, or using a bus? If you normally rely on public transportation, that might not be an effective method. You might need to connect with other people to help you work through that evacuation plan and to end up in a shelter location that will be safe for you. NC 201 services can connect you to your closest shelter location to help you prepare ahead of time and to know where those locations are. COVID-19 considerations are extremely important in this section that we're talking about right now. You're going to want to avoid congregate sheltering where at all possible. And congregate sheltering is the typical type of shelter that we consider, where everybody comes into a gym or a large enclosed area all together. There might be some certain sectioning off in the area, but overall everyone's coming together in mass amount. And because of COVID-19 and social distancing requirements that we really need to be practicing at this time, congregate sheltering is not the best option. And so if you can find a location that is not reliant on being surrounded by a large group of people, that would be ideal. And that may take an extra amount of planning beforehand to figure out. And also, if you cannot avoid a congregate shelter setting, if that is where you have to go, be aware that certain shelters may be enacting requirements like face coverings, practicing social distancing, and be prepared for symptom checks and temperature checks. And if you are sick, if you are experiencing symptoms at the time that you're seeking shelter, you may need to also find an alternative shelter plan for what to do in that situation. So lots of things to consider on top of how you would normally plan in this situation. Number 3, assemble an emergency preparedness kit and gather supplies. There are lots of informational resources out there for what should be in your emergency preparedness kit and how you can go about gathering your supplies. Legal Aid has previously presented on this topic, and FEMA and Ready NC offer lots of materials. In general, though, you should consider having non-perishable food, medications, safety equipment, and especially with COVID-19 considerations, face coverings, sanitation efforts, if you're not able to wash your hands under running water and soap. Lots of things to consider at this. So I absolutely encourage you to reach out to those resources to help come up with a checklist on the best things to put into your preparedness kit. One thing that I also want to add under this area is to take into account your individual needs. Lots of checklists are out there to help you start as a base to plan, but they're not going to be taking into account your individual household needs. If you have individuals with disabilities in your household, if you have elderly individuals, if you have pets, those are all things that may not be included in other items for checklists that you find. So keep that in mind. Modify your checklist to meet your needs. Connecting to national warning and alert systems. We've all heard the ringing that comes through our phones when you've got an alert coming through. You can't ignore it. It's going to happen and it's going to terrify you. But that's the point. The point is to make sure that you're aware of what's going on with an impending crisis. NOAA National Radio Service. There are radios out there that you can purchase that can help you connect to this service. That is highly recommended, and I can, after all the checklists that I've seen out there, that a NOAA radio is guaranteed to be on them. Make sure you're also including batteries and backup batteries for that as well, so you don't run out of power. But with our new age in technology, there are actually some great resources now where you can download mobile alert applications onto your iPhone or Android. FEMA has them, Ready NC has them, American Red Cross, the Weather Channel. All of these are great resources to connect to, and they'll be at literally the touch of your fingertips. So if you have access to a cellular mobile device and you can download these applications, that might be a really great resource for you to start. Number 5, protecting your property. So beforehand, before disaster strikes or you know that one's coming, there are certain things that you should do to protect the property that you're living on. So clearing your yard of movable objects is extremely important. If you're going to have high wind speeds, it's possible that objects that are movable in your yard are going to get picked up and probably create even further damage to your home. Cover windows and doors. Also, something that often gets overlooked is your CO detectors. Make sure that they're working. Make sure that you have batteries to replace if they're not. You want to avoid as much as possible the risk that you will be exposed to carbon monoxide poisoning because you're unable to detect that as a smell. So it's, if that were the case, you're going to want to make sure that your detectors work. And so you can be aware if that is a risk to your family. Also be prepared to turn off your utilities. Know how to turn off your water, how to turn off your power and electric in the event of an emergency, because you may need to do that beforehand or immediately after if you return to the scene. Number 6, review and update critical documents. These include insurance policies, especially flood insurance policies, property ownership documents like your deed to your home, estate planning documents like a power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. These are things that you should have on hand. Also include critical documents like birth certificates, IDs, social security cards. If you are going through the recovery process currently or have gone through one before, you know exactly what I'm about to say. You know that in your recovery process, it's imperative that you have lots of documentation to not only show damage from the storm, but that proof of ownership that you lived there at the time of the storm, proof of citizenship. Organizations are going to require a lot of documents from you if you're recovering and seeking recovery funds, especially if you're seeking FEMA assistance afterwards. So you're going to want to have your hands on that, and you're going to want to make copies and make sure that everything is up to date, and keep them in a safe place. Keep them in a place that you can take with you if you're evacuating. And if you need assistance with these documents, you realize something's missing, something's outdated, you want to make copies of it, that is something that our project commonly assists with. So please reach out to us for that, and we'd be happy to help. Number 7, help your neighbors and loved ones. Checking on your neighbors is extremely important, and especially in rural North Carolina, you may not live in a neighborhood, you may be a couple of miles away from your neighbors, but arguably that's the most important situation where you need to be checking in on those closest to you, particularly if those people are elderly or living alone. Ask if they've got a plan. Do they know what they're going to do if they need to evacuate? Do they need help with anything? This is definitely the time to lean on each other and support each other. And I'm going to also talk a little bit about mental health under this section because as many of you know, if you are still recovering from past hurricanes, the recovery process is very long, or can be very long, and it can bring up past trauma. It can be filled with anxiety and grief and worry. And so it's important that you're taking care of your mental health as well as your physical health during this time and while you're preparing for a disaster situation. And also consider providing some extra support for any youth or children living in your household because it's, they may be scared, they may be confused, and this is exacerbated extremely so during an immediate crisis. And if you are a member of a disaster aid organization or are a first responder, please also consider how secondary trauma can affect you. And please seek help if you need it. Number 8, learn some basic safety skills. First aid, CPR, American Red Cross holds great classes and certifications to be able to learn these things. And it's important that at least you or someone in your household knows these safety skills in case of disaster striking and someone gets hurt, someone needs assistance, and there aren't first responders immediately available. It's going to be you. And it's going to be important that you know what to do in the moment of a disaster to provide some critical care until you can reach medical professionals. Number 9, stay up to date on news and guidance. There's a lot of things going on right now. I know the news is dominated by COVID-19, and to a certain extent, it's extremely important. And we need to know how to best prepare ourselves with this infectious disease disaster that is currently ongoing. But also keep up to date with the weather and know what's going on if you should be preparing for something that's coming up on our coast. And also, again, keep abreast of public health guidance because the public health community is going to be extremely important in how we respond to a natural disaster during this pandemic. And lastly, please review your emergency plans. Especially if it's been a couple of months since you created it or created your emergency supply kit. You should be reviewing that, checking in on those items that you've put together, updating, adding if necessary. Because a lot of the times, this has happened to me as well. I created a plan, I put together a kit last hurricane season, and it's been a good year since I've visited it. So it's important to update yourself on what you've already done, update your family where changes are necessary. All right, so I'm going to check in on comments here really quick. I don't think we have any. But we have prepared a quick little Q&A session. So I'm going to be joined with Duke Law student, Naquan. Hi, Naquan, how are you?
Good, how are you, Elizabeth?
Good. All right, well, so we've got a few sort of frequently asked questions that we'll go over right now. And Naquan's just going to ask me some stuff and I will answer it to the best of my ability.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. The first one is preparing for disasters time-consuming and expensive?
Preparing for disasters may seem time-consuming at first, but I can guarantee you that it's better to prepare now and to mitigate some of the time-consuming recovery processes that you may experience in the future when a disaster strikes. And your home may already contain emergency kit items and you don't realize it. So just thinking about this and marking those items for a kit, but also taking into account things that you're missing is extremely important right now. So it may take some time if you are missing items to gather those, especially during COVID-19. We've seen a shortage of certain supplies like hygiene items and medical supplies and toilet paper. We all know we're looking for it. So keep those in mind and give yourself a little extra time this season. I think in general, this season might take a longer amount of time to prepare, but it's certainly less time extensive than if you don't prepare at all. On the back end, your recovery process may be extended a lot longer.
Okay, that's very helpful. The second question is, will my homeowner's insurance cover everything if a hurricane affects me?
Homeowners insurance, this is not always the case. And which is why you want to check your insurance policy, make sure it's up to date and check exactly what it covers. Every policy is going to be different. And you'll want to consult with your insurance agent ahead of time to clarify what it covers and what it doesn't. If you have some questions about your insurance policy or having a difficult time communicating with your insurance organization, or if you're in the recovery process and actually have some outstanding claims that you've been trying to work with, but are having a difficult time or are experiencing barriers with that, that is something that our project can help you with. So please do give us a call for that one.
Awesome, thank you. And the last question is about evacuation during a hurricane. Is it okay if I drive through a small amount of water, flood water?
The general answer for that one is going to be no. And to be very, very, very careful if you're going to attempt to drive through standing water. As little as 12 inches of water can float smaller SUVs, and 18 inches of water can float larger vehicles like a full-sized SUV. And it's actually very difficult sometimes to determine the full depth of the water when you're driving. And there can be a significant amount of risk if you're going to attempt to drive through flooding, even if you think it's a small amount of water. So be very careful. And if you're concerned, if you're trapped in that situation where you don't feel as though it's safe to drive, contact first responders immediately, call 911 and let them know about your situation, because you will likely need assistance evacuating in that situation.
Thank you so much for the presentation and answering the questions.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope this presentation was helpful to everyone. I hope that everyone's staying healthy and safe, and that you're considering some preparation activities and making these efforts now to assist you and your family in the future. And if, again, you are experiencing any disaster-related legal issues, I highly encourage you to reach out to us at Legal Aid. Our number is 1-866-219-5262. Thank you so much and have a great Friday.